Jan Baalsrud fights against the fierce current, his thick winter clothing weighing him down as he swims through the freezing Arctic waters. Behind him, his fishing boat erupts in a massive explosion, sending burning debris into the sky. Bullets slice through the waves around him as he struggles toward shore. The young Norwegian has just become the only man left of a failed commando raid into his Nazi-occupied homeland. His 11 companions have either been shot or captured. Now, shivering, soaked to the bone, and missing a boot, he hauls himself onto the snow-covered rocks and stumbles into a narrow gully. The sound of German voices grows closer. 4 soldiers are hurriedly scrambling up the slope, and they're heading straight for him. His numb fingers fumble with his Colt pistol. He squeezes the trigger. Nothing. The weapon is frozen. Ripping out the magazine, he clears the jam and fires twice. 2 soldiers drop. The others dive for cover. Baalsrud seizes his chance, lurching to his feet and disappearing into the vast Arctic wilderness. The temperature hovers at 20 degrees Fahrenheit, and his soaked uniform is already beginning to freeze. Without proper gear or supplies, he faces a stark reality. In these conditions, the average person has less than 3 hours to live. Every minute in these conditions brings him closer to freezing solid, and the Germans are still hunting. Early life and career. Jan Sigurd Baalsrud was born in present-day Oslo, then known as Christiania, on December 13, 1917. Following in his father's footsteps, he trained to become a cartographical instrument maker, earning his certification in 1939. It was skilled, detailed work that required patience, precision, and steady hands, qualities that would stay with him throughout his life. However, on April 9th the following year, his peaceful career was violently interrupted when Nazi Germany launched a massive invasion of Norway. The neutral nation was caught completely off guard. As German warships sailed into Norwegian ports and paratroopers descended from the skies, Baalsrud, like many young Norwegians, rushed to join the defense of his homeland. He fought with distinction in Vestfold, but Norway's resistance proved futile. Within 2 months, the country fell under Nazi control. Refusing to accept defeat, Baalsrud fled to neutral Sweden. In Stockholm, he began carrying out mail missions for the British legation, which was maintaining contact with various Norwegian resistance groups. However, Swedish authorities discovered his activities. Arrested on his way to the Norwegian border, he was sentenced to 7 months in prison for espionage. After serving 5 months, he was released in the spring of 1941, but expelled from the country. Over the next year, he traveled through the Soviet Union, across Africa, and finally to the United States, before making his way to Britain in 1941. It was there that Baalsrud found his true calling, joining the Norwegian company Linge. But this was no ordinary military unit. Working closely with Britain's Special Operations Executive, or SOE, for training in Scotland, these elite Norwegian commandos studied the arts of sabotage, survival, and covert operations. In preparation for some of the most dangerous missions of the war, small teams sailing across the treacherous North Sea in fishing boats before infiltrating occupied Norway to gather intelligence, organize resistance, and strike at German military targets. They knew that if caught, they would be subject to Hitler's infamous commando order, which demanded the execution of all Allied Special Operations personnel caught behind enemy lines, likely after hours of excruciating torture. Operation Martin. By early 1943, Baalsrud was ready to head into action. Along with 3 other commandos and a boat crew of 8 Norwegians, he was selected for Operation Martin, a bold mission to infiltrate the rugged far north of Norway, where the commandos were to destroy a German airfield control tower at Bardufoss and establish resistance networks around Tromsø. On March 24th, he and his comrades boarded their innocent-looking fishing boat, Bratholm, and slipped away from Scalloway in the Shetland Islands to begin their voyage across the frigid North Sea, bound for the remote reaches of the Norwegian Arctic. However, as they approached their destination of Tromsø, they encountered an unexpected problem. The nearby waters were crawling with German patrol boats. Quickly realizing that they would need a change of plan, mission leader Lieutenant Sigurd Eskeland ordered the crew to set course for Toftefjord, even further north. 5 days after departing Scotland, they finally arrived on Norwegian soil. The first phase of their plan involved making contact with resistance fighters, which led them to a local store. However, a case of mistaken identity caused the mission to fail at the first hurdle. Some accounts claim that the shopkeeper coincidentally had the same name as the man they were looking for, while others suggest that their contact had indeed once owned the store, but had since passed away and left the business to someone else. Whatever the truth may be, what is certain is that the merchant they spoke to had nothing to do with the resistance, nor did he want to. Instead, he reported the suspicious visitors to the local sheriff, who promptly alerted the German security police. As the error became painfully clear, Lieutenant Escalon gave the order to abort the mission. However, as Baalsrud and his fellow commandos raced back to their fishing boat Brattholm, they realized the situation was even worse than they thought. The German warship R-56 had just arrived in Tuftafjord and had discovered the boat. The Norwegians had only one option: to scuttle their vessel and attempt escape. They set the time delay fuse on their explosive cargo and abandoned ship before Brattholm erupted in a spectacular explosion. Though the men were able to commandeer another small boat, their getaway plans were abruptly cut short as they immediately came under fire, sinking the vessel. While all his comrades either perished in the skirmish or were taken prisoner and later tortured and executed, Baalsrud frantically swam back toward dry land as a frenzy of bullets whizzed around him, eventually reaching the shore. Into the wild. Jan Baalsrud was now the last man left from Operation Martin. Soaking wet from his swim and missing one sea boot, he spotted a gully, a long, lightning-shaped sliver in the snowy hillside, and scrambled into it, taking cover behind a large rock. As he watched 4 German soldiers climbing toward him, he took stock of his desperate situation. Alone, trapped in enemy-controlled territory, his uniform crystallizing into a shell of ice. He had no map, no food, no water, and no plan. He did, however, have his Colt pistol. From behind the rock, he watched the soldiers getting closer, now within range. He aimed and pulled the trigger, but the gun jammed. He kept trying, it kept jamming. He pulled the magazine free, clearing the frozen rounds. His second attempt found its mark. One soldier collapsed instantly, another stumbled backward with a cry. The others drew back, buying him precious time. He turned up toward the hill, planted his bootless foot in the snow, and ran. Making his way to the neighboring island of Hursoy, Baalsrud found shelter at the only house with permanent residents. The family took him in, provided food, and dried his clothes. The next morning, they rowed him to the much larger island of Ringvassøya. From there, he would need to somehow make his way to the Swedish border, a journey of roughly 80 miles through some of the most challenging terrain in occupied Norway. After 4 long days of arduous trekking through the harsh landscape, Baalsrud reached Bjørneskaret, where he found brief respite. There, telegraph operator Einar Sørensen and his father helped row him to the mainland. Near Snarby, Baalsrud found shelter with a farmer named Alfred Lukkertsen, who arranged his transport by boat to Lyngsidet. There, equipped with skis and poles, Baalsrud set out again, only to immediately encounter a German checkpoint. Forced to climb into the mountains on the western side of Lyngenfjord, he soon found himself caught in a violent storm. In the brutal combination of sleet and snow, Baalsrud lost all visibility. He devised an improvised navigation technique, throwing snowballs ahead of him and listening for them to hit the ground to determine if he was heading towards a cliff edge. Without realizing it, he was climbing Jägarvara, a mountain nearly 3,000 feet high. A roaring avalanche cut his ascent short, hurling him 300 feet down the mountainside. As consciousness returned, his skis lay in splinters, his gear lost in the snow, and his eyes had succumbed to snow blindness. For 3 days, he wandered alone, his mind playing tricks on him as he hallucinated the voices of his deceased companions from the Brattholm. A lucky find and a grim decision. On his 4th day of wandering, totally exhausted and snowblind, Baalsrud stumbled upon a house in the small village of Furuflaten. By sheer luck, he had found the home resistance member, Marius Grunvall. This stroke of fortune saved his life. A nearby building housed a German military headquarters, and had he stumbled into the wrong door, his extraordinary escape would have ended there. The Grunvall family hid Baalsrud in their barn, where he spent 4 days trying to recover his strength. German soldiers searched the building once during his stay, but they never checked the loft, where he lay concealed behind a bed of hay. As Baalsrud regained his strength, the Grunwalds worked to keep him alive while devising a plan for his continued escape. However, the severe frostbite he had suffered meant he could no longer walk on his own. Marius Grunwald recruited 3 friends to help move Baalsrud to safety. In a masterfully coordinated effort, they managed to sneak him past the German garrison stationed at the local school. Under cover of darkness on April 12th, they rowed him across the fjord to the eastern shore, where they placed him in a small shed on an unoccupied farm in Revdalen, a structure Baalsrud would sardonically nickname the Hotel Savoy. Baalsrud's hotel was little more than a shed, about 6 by 9 feet, where he lay on a wooden platform with access to basic supplies: some food, water, a knife, and a bottle of homemade liquor. Marius Grunwald promised to return, but a sudden storm kept him away for 5 days. During this time, Baalsrud's condition deteriorated dramatically as the frostbite in his feet worsened. It was here, in this tiny shelter, that Baalsrud made one of the grimmest decisions of his journey. Realizing that gangrene was setting in and fearing it would spread up his legs, he took decisive action. Using the knife he had been left with, he began operating on his own feet. After sterilizing the blade in the flame of a lamp and taking a swig of liquor, he cut into several of his toes to drain the infection, including amputating one of his big toes. The rough road to freedom. Meanwhile, Grunwald had been coordinating with others to aid Baalsrud's escape. He contacted his former teacher from Lyngsidet, Principal Ingjald Liegland, who helped secure funding and supplies through resistance contacts in Tromsø. The school janitor in Lyngsidet was even enlisted to build a lightweight ski sled that could transport the now crippled commando. The plan was for Grunwald and a group of 3 friends to pull Baalsrud up to a mountain plateau above Revdalen, where helpers from Mandalen would take over and transport him further toward the Swedish border. After a grueling and dangerous climb, Grunwald's group successfully hauled Baalsrud up to the agreed meeting point. But when they arrived, there was no sign of the helpers from Mandalen. The steep mountainside made it impossible to take Baalsrud back down to Revdalen. With no other options, they were forced to leave him in a makeshift snow cave beneath the boulder, which would later become known as the Gentleman's Stone. The Mandalen group's absence wasn't due to cowardice. German forces were conducting house searches in their village, making it too dangerous for them to leave. They made 2 failed attempts to locate Baalsrud's snow cave. Meanwhile, he remained buried in the snow for over a week. When Grunwald finally returned with his girlfriend, Agneta Lannes, on May 1st, expecting to find a corpse, they were astonished to discover Baalsrud still alive and able to speak. They left him with additional supplies and a ski pole, hoping the Mandalen helpers would now be able to find his location. The next day, 4 men from Mandalen finally located the snow cave and began moving Baalsrud east. However, their progress was slow, and another storm forced them to turn back. They left Baalsrud in another shelter near a marker stone on the descent to Mandalen. It was here that he made the difficult decision to amputate his remaining 9 toes with his pocket knife to prevent the spread of gangrene. Escape. Meanwhile, a local farmer named Niels Nilsson undertook an extraordinary mission, skiing 40 miles to Sweden and back to arrange the final phase of the escape. Help finally arrived in the form of the Sami, Norway's indigenous people. By the time they came to transport Baalsrud, he weighed just 80 pounds. They harnessed their sled to a team of reindeer and began the perilous final push to freedom. Racing through a corner of Nazi-aligned Finland, with German forces in close pursuit, they finally crossed into neutral Sweden via a frozen lake. The journey had taken an incredible 63 days since the firefight in Toftefjord. More than 70 Norwegian civilians had risked their lives to help Baalsrud reach safety. Baalsrud spent the next 6 months in a Swedish hospital, recovering from his wounds and learning to walk again without his toes. Once strong enough, he boarded an RAF Mosquito aircraft to take him back to Britain. After spending some time training other Norwegian commandos in Scotland, he requested to return to Norway as an agent. He remained in active service there until the war's end in 1945, when he finally reunited with the family he had left behind 5 years earlier. For their roles in his escape, both Baalsrud and many of his helpers received military honors. The British appointed him an honorary member of the Order of the British Empire, while Norway awarded him the St. Olav's Medal with Oak Branch. Post-war life and legacy. After the war, Baalsrud served as chairman of the Norwegian Disabled Veterans Union before moving to the Canary Islands. Though his escape made him a Norwegian folk hero, immortalized in both David Hovart's 1955 book We Die Alone and the 1957 Oscar-nominated film 9 Lives, Baalsrud himself rejected this mythologizing and rarely spoke of his experiences. He passed away on December 30th, 1988. Today, Baalsrud's legacy lives on in Norway. An annual remembrance march traces his escape route, and red letter B markers still guide hikers along his path through the fjords. Yet perhaps his greatest memorial is the story itself, not just of one man's incredible will to survive, but of the courage of ordinary Norwegians who risked everything to help a stranger in need.